Good morning, everyone, and we are so pleased to have you all joining us for what I believe is our third Nonprofit Management Institute. I would like to recognize our partners and those who have helped to make this possible. Tanaya Sudreth Lynch, she's the Senior Program Officer for Capacity Building Initiatives at Triangle Community Foundation and has been instrumental in helping to develop support for this program. So thank you, Tanaya, and thank you, Triangle Community Foundation. And of course, Steve Hayes, our colleague and partner in Capacity Building Network, who is also the director of the Guilford Nonprofit Consortium, worked very closely with us at the outset of this program to assure that the excellent program that they had been offering in person could be used here at the North Carolina for Nonprofits as a virtual program. So thank you, Steve. Thank you, Tanaya. And let me also recognize Dr. Pamela Palmer, who we've been working with from the outset of this really excellent program. With her guidance and developing our curriculum, we have really had great feedback, and we hope that all of you will also enjoy the program this morning. So again, next slide. Thank you to Triangle Community Foundation, the Guilford Nonprofit Consortium, and for those of you taking the course, recognizing that you're able to receive credit through the Duke University Nonprofit Continuing Education Series. So without further ado, and I didn't introduce myself, but my name is on the screen. I'm Jean Tedrow. I'm President and CEO of the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits, and just really thrilled that we're able to offer this excellent program to you today. And so without further ado, I will pass this on to Lisa Crosland, our Chief Program Officer, who will recognize her team. Thank you again.
Actually, real quick, did Tanaya or Steve, did you want to say anything real quick? We have you on here. A brief welcome, not to put you on the spot.
Well, I just want to speak for the Guilford Nonprofit Consortium and thank the NC Center for Nonprofits for this partnership, because we would not be having the Institute without your leadership and ability to make this a statewide event. The mission statement of the consortium says that through building community, we will have a more efficient nonprofit sector. And that's just the opposite of what the rest of the world seems to say. So this type of leadership from the NC Center, we're very grateful for, not just in this, but in all of the ways that y'all lead the nonprofits in North Carolina. So thank you for this partnership. Dr. Palmer, you're statewide now, but you'll always be Guilford County's own. And I know that you're going to all enjoy the curriculum this year. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Steve.
And I'm not much of a talker, and so I hate that I'm following Steve, but I am grateful for this partnership as well. The Triangle Capacity Building Network is also partnered with the center to offer this program, and you know, our value is to build nonprofit and leadership capacity in the Triangle, and you know, this Nonprofit Management Institute does just that. This is the third or fourth run of the program, I believe, and those that came before you were just so pleased with the program and excited to like flex their leadership muscles in their organizations and take back what they learned and all of that. And I'm excited for you to go on this journey as well. I know Dr. Palmer is a great facilitator and has so much knowledge to share with you all. So I'm excited and eager to hear how your experience goes at the end. Can't wait to celebrate at graduation. Look, I'm already at the end.
Thank you, Tanaya, and thank you, Steve. We just really do appreciate this partnership. So thank you. And now I'll turn it back over to Lisa. I think. Yep, right. There she is.
Right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome again to our third round of our virtual North Carolina Nonprofit Management Institute. As mentioned earlier, I'm Lisa Crosland. I'm the Chief Learning Officer here at the center. The North Carolina Center for Nonprofits mission is to educate, connect, and advocate for North Carolina's nonprofits over all 100 counties. So whether you're an emerging or seasoned nonprofit, the center has valuable member resources at your fingertips. Hopefully, you all have received, I'm going to be Vanna White for a minute, this wonderful workbook, right? I hope we've all received it in the mail. It has all of the materials that you're going to need inside for our series, for our 6th series session. If you did not receive this manual, please let us know in the chat so we can verify that we have sent it to the right address. And that way we can ensure that we get everything to you. And I think I saw something pop up from Valencia Tumor saying she didn't receive it. So Leslie, I guess, or my team can just make note of that, please. So if you like, I just want to make another mention. If you would like to learn more about our many member benefits and resources available to you, please visit our website. I'm just going to pop up here in a minute and go to membership, where you'll find all the information on joining. Leslie, if you could take us there real quick so we can just guide our members and our guests through that. Here's our website, and you would click on membership, and it has all the information on becoming a member, member benefits. All these things are good information for you to have on joining. So again, I want to thank you all that are members, and those of you who are not members, we hope to serve you soon. I'd like to take a quick minute to introduce our program team. I'm waiting for Leslie. If you could. So again, you have Lisa Crosland. We have Rebecca Beck, who's our education manager. She greeted you upon coming in. And we have Leslie Morales, who's our nonprofit services assistant, who's doing all of our background production work for us and keeping us moving along. If there are not any questions, I'd like to take to invite Rebecca to go over a few housekeeping items before we get started today. And looking forward to staying with you for the remainder of our time.
Thanks, Lisa. Just a few quick notes about Zoom. Some of you have already updated your name there, which we're grateful to see. You can include your organization if that's helpful as we get to know one another. It's always nice to see, as well as pronouns. So well done on that. If you're not sure how to do that, it's those 3 dots to the right of your picture. You can click on that and it'll allow you to have the option to change your name. Pretty much everyone is pretty familiar with Zoom by now, right? In our virtual world that we've entered into, somewhat unwillingly at times, but here we are nonetheless. So I just wanted to let you know that, everybody's muted upon entry. You can raise your hand if you'd like to be recognized. That's down below in reactions. You'll see raise your hand. You can also use those reactions. If somebody says something that you really agree with, go ahead and engage. Give them, a heart, a thumbs up, whatever word. Somebody says something funny, go ahead and give the laughing face if you'd like. Feel free to engage in that way. I also encourage you to show your video, which lots of you are doing, but if at times you need to take a break from video, that's totally understandable. Please feel free to do so and use discretion, and whatever you need to do is fine. The sessions will be recorded and they're stored as unlisted videos on our YouTube account. We share those in the wraparound email along with our slides for the day. And we also include our workbook sheets, our handouts for each session in the pre-session email that goes out. So you always have hopefully your workbook in front of you, as well as the digital copy. Should you need to make copies or you need to use that going forward, that's fine. So with that, let's go to the next slide. And also just a quick overview of the Duke Nonprofit Management Program Certificate. You have the opportunity at the end of the series, the 6-session series, to go ahead and transfer your credits coursework from this course towards a continuing studies certificate. It is a custom certificate. The credits are $25 per hour. There is an application that's really easy to fill out, and you send it back to us for our authorization, and then you'll send that off to Duke along with your payment. And those credits go towards your program certificate. And a few of the people on the line today have their certificates already, so that's great. But we'll be sending more information about that. Just wanted you to be aware of that opportunity. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my wonderful colleague, Leslie, who's actually driving this ship. Thank you, Leslie, for sharing your screen and walking us through all these transitions. Thank you all.
Hey everyone, happy to be here and I hope everyone's having a good morning. I just wanted to give a brief intro and read a little bio on Dr. Pamela Palmer, our facilitator today. I've had the pleasure of working with her since the beginning of this when I was still an intern at the center. So this institute really holds near and dear to my heart. So Dr. Palmer has provided consultation in various roles related to leadership, organizational, program, and community development. Her professional experience also includes consulting in the areas of program development and management, organizational development, staff development, program evaluation, and community development. She currently leads the Guilford County Resource and Referral Center as one of the founders and executive directors. And in addition, she was an instructor and assistant professor at High Point University for 23 years. And she was an instructor and assistant professor of the nonprofit leadership and management program there. And Dr. Palmer, if you want to say a few words, that would also be great. And I can also attach a longer bio from her personal website into the chat so you can read more about her as well.
Thank you, Leslie, and good morning, everyone. It's good to see you all. I'm gonna just say hello real quick and turn it back over to our producers of the Institute, and I'll see you back in a couple of slides.
Give me 1 second. I'm getting lost in all my screens. Okay, and this is the agenda for today. I just want to let everyone know that we will be having a couple breaks throughout because we know that 3 hours is a lot and we will be going through a lot of material and want to also give you some time to like go to the bathroom, get a snack. So, and if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat and we will be watching the chat as well and let Dr. Palmer know of any of your questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Leslie. So wanted to do a bit of introductions of everyone. And the easiest way we thought to do so was to use the annotate function. For those of you, I'll walk you through real quick. You will kind of hover over your screen, your Zoom screen. You'll see view options at the top. You want to use that drop down and select annotate. And we've got a couple different options. I kind of like the stamp for this portion. You can go ahead and select what your stamp will be and just place a stamp, one per participant for whichever county you're representing today, where your location is. And we'll start to see those populate on the map here. This will be really interesting to see where we're all coming in from all over the state. Excellent. That's great. Very nice. All right, so they're central for a bit, and then we've got some that are around in the outskirts. Very nice. Thank you all for participating in that. Terrific. So we'll go ahead and pass it off to you, Dr. Palmer.
Thank you. I always like to see where all of our participants are from. Wow, looks like we've got quite a few of us that are central, somewhat central, in terms of being in the middle of the state. So that's always real interesting. Rebecca, I do see a couple of questions in the chat. I think there's like a couple related to the Duke certificate. And so we might want to give some response to those.
Right, right. So I believe the total credit hours for the certificate is 72. This course, there was the opportunity to put towards the certificate 15 credits. We're waiting on approval for more just because we increased our series from 5 to 6 sessions. So that verification from them will be coming through shortly. So we'll know it'll be somewhere between 15 and 18 credits towards that total of 72 credit hours. And it is a custom certificate. So you sort of piece together different courses that qualify, some of which Duke offers towards that certificate. Can you miss one meeting and still receive the credits? Yes. We do send the recordings. So you are required to watch the recording and do any related work that happens within that session that you missed. It's not ideal if you miss any more than 1 or 2 sessions, but we'll work with you, and just know that there's the opportunity to miss one if you need to and still stay up to speed. We try to send out the recordings either the same day of the session or the next day after. So you have a couple of business days before the next session to catch up if you'd like. I think that answers all the certificate questions. Yes. Yes. Oh, and we're seeing people using annotation for the first time. So I'm happy to see that. You get to learn all these really cool things through this process.
And Rebecca, maybe you can just go through it one more time. I think I see a question. Someone's still asking, where is it via the view?
Oh, the annotate?
Yeah.
Sure. So when you go up, if you hover over your Zoom screen, towards the top, the very top, you'll see view options. You want to click on the arrow that goes down there, and then you'll see annotate there as a feature. If you don't, it may be that you need to update Zoom. Sometimes you may have an older version of Zoom, but annotate has been around for a while, so you should have it there. And it allows you to type in some text, to do drawing, to stamp, arrow, erase, all kinds of things. Thanks, Lisa.
I can see that Valencia, she found it. So
Oh,
she
good,
got it.
good,
Thanks.
good,
Yeah.
good, good.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Thank you, Mia. Is it Mia or Maya? We're going to practice unmuting now.
Uh-huh.
Mia, first one. Okay.
There we
got
go.
Mia with
All
us.
right. Great.
Thanks, Mia.
Thank you. I just love to see that we're already helping each other, and that's really a key element of this experience. We obviously we have a program scheduled, and we have pretty much outlined our focus for all of the sessions, as well as the overarching intent of the Institute. But we all have something to offer in this learning space, and so please always feel free to share. We will do our best to pay attention to the chat and acknowledge your questions. But by all means, please continue to share and showcase that spirit of helping, because that's really what we're all here to do. So thank you for that. I think we have pretty much responded to the questions in the chat. I don't think there's anything there left to respond to, folks, as we're getting ready to move into our content. So thank you. Wow, welcome to our third, I guess we could say cohort, really, of the Nonprofit Management Institute. We're thrilled to be here and so glad that we're able to deliver the Institute statewide in this fashion. One of the things that's real important to know about the Nonprofit Management Institute is that it is a capacity building framework for managing nonprofits that the North Carolina Center has established. It is a part of an inventory, really, of offerings that the NC Center has And it is framed around our principles and practices. There is a guide, as you kind of see at the top of this image, there is a guide that really provides us with an outline to do all the work we do related to building capacity of nonprofits. When you kind of go to the right of the circle, I guess that would be clockwise, there are also a set of principles that are framed around the fundamental components of managing a nonprofit. And then there's a unique element to our framework, and that is looking at the management condition of a nonprofit and then determining what types of capacity building work is necessary to move that nonprofit along in terms of growth and development. And then we have another element of our framework, which is a capacity assessment, and we're going to assess or guide you through a process to assess the capacity of your nonprofit, both on a basic level as it relates to the management conditions, but then also we're going to do a deep dive into looking at assessing specific practices as it relates to your nonprofit as well. And so this is our framework, and what we will be doing in today's session is we will be establishing a foundation by learning and understanding how these pieces of our framework, how they work, and how they connect, and how this framework can serve as a guide for you as you're trying to grow and develop in the area of nonprofit management. The other thing I would say too is that this is as much as we could, we designed the Institute using this virtual platform with the intent for it to be participatory. So I know that there are some webinar designs where you go through a series of slides in a PowerPoint and it's kind of one way, meaning information out. But this institute is designed to be participatory. And so it will be a two-way exchange that we're trying to utilize to actually teach and train about these primary functions of managing a nonprofit. So it'll be a little difficult for you to kind of step away and come back and step away and come back. Because we will be building on different pieces of what we're doing, and we will have you engaged in your workbook and doing breakouts and so on and so forth. So just kind of keep that in mind as we're moving through this session today, and definitely as we do the sessions to come. So at any rate, if we could go to the next slide. So you received access to an electronic version of the Principles and Practices Guide, and so we put here in the PowerPoint or in the presentation today just a picture of what that looks like in the booklet. And so you can see that we have a page there that highlights how to use the guide and what those different functions or what those different conditions mean. And then also we put there the example of one of those principles and where the practice is, the primary practice, and then what it means as it relates to build, thrive, and sustain for a particular principle in this slide. So at any rate, you have this at your disposal. Yes, there are hard copies of the Principles and Practices Guide. Rebecca, do you want to, that was definitely going to be next. Do you want to go ahead and just talk about how folks can access the hard copy?
Sure thing. Yeah, if you're interested in purchasing a hard copy, I'd be happy to help you with that. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and put my email address in the chat, and you can send me a quick email and I can send you pricing. There is different pricing based on whether you're a member or prospective member, non-member, and also if you're buying bulk as well. So I'll go ahead and put my email in the chat. If anyone's interested, you can send me a quick email and I'll send you that info.
Great. Any other questions about the guide or how to access that? So, so we're going to go ahead and just jump right in and begin with focusing on the 12 principles. In your workbook, you have a handout or a worksheet that's titled 12 Principles. And so what we would like for you to do is the page number, let me grab mine. The page number is page 8. And so what we want you to do is we want you to list the 12 or list 12 fundamental functions that you think is required or that it takes for to manage a strong nonprofit. And so if you would just kind of take time to write these out on your worksheet, and then I'll come back with a little bit more instructions in terms of conversation. So what you're doing is you are writing all of what you think should be considered as strong areas of management as it relates to a nonprofit. And if we could go back to the gallery view, that would be great. So the goal is to list 12, but if you stop short of 12, that's okay too. So let's take about another minute for that. So just as a way to just continue a little bit with introductions, there are quite a few of us, right, in this class. And so it would take us a while to do individual introductions. So thank you for those of you who have your names and the name of your organization and all of that. That helps us to just kind of know who you are and for all of us to get acquainted that way. But I would also just like for you real quick in the chat, if you would just give us a quick kind of shout out of what is your city or county known for, just real quick in the chat. I see military, I see agriculture, textiles. Wow, what an awesome state we live in, right? With all of these different ways in which we contribute to what happens in our state around yeah, I see tech, furniture. Okay, great. So one of the things, what we want to do now is we want to continue to kind of learn about what the 12 principles are in our framework. And so to do that, we are going to ask you to help us develop a word cloud. And what I would like for you to do in that list that you have created, go ahead and just put a little check mark beside the top 3, your opinion on your list. What would you consider to be the top 3 from your list? And then I'm going to have Rebecca walk us through how we're going to showcase that.
So I believe, Leslie, you're going to
Oh, is that
put a
Leslie?
link.
Okay.
Yeah, it's okay. Leslie has put a link for Poll Everywhere in the chat. You will click on that. It'll open up a browser page, I believe, or a dialog box. And you'll go ahead and type in your 3 as separate entries. So it will notify you that you've submitted 1, you've submitted 2, you've submitted 3. And then once we have all those in there, we'll go ahead and display the word art or the word cloud. And if you're having any trouble using the Poll Everywhere, just raise your hand or let us know in the chat. But hopefully everyone is able to click on that link there. And as a reminder, each of your top 3 have to be entered as separate entries.
Also, I realize now that poll is full and is no longer accepting questions, which seems to be the issue that we were having last year. I thought we got past it, but it seems that I did not fix that.
Okay. All right.
But I can show that now.
Perfect. And then we'll come back and use the chat. That's okay. We'll come back and use the chat. Okay. So in terms of just looking at kind of what stands out, wow, transparency seems to be a really big area of focus for us in terms of managing a nonprofit. And then it looks like, well, I don't know, community and transparency seems like they're competing, right? And then of course, looks like maybe equity and looks like what, accountability. I'm just trying to kind of look at and then maybe board and financial, and then strategic. Let's see, board, financial, strategic, and looks like development maybe, and then it looks like the others are kind of showing up on the same level. Okay, all right, so transparency, community, equity, accountability, board, and I'm assuming that's board of directors or board development or something related to that. Finances, being strategic, or maybe strategic planning, I'm not sure. I see planning over there as well. And then development, which is infers fundraising and fund development and the like. Okay. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's 8. And then the other ones are kind of competing that way. All right, so if we could go back to the gallery. So as I said before, our framework highlights 12 principles or 12 management functions, and that's not the end of what that list could include, but that is kind of where we at the North Carolina Center, that's how we framed our framework up to this point. And we're always looking at ways to enhance what we do. So there may be 13, 14, and 15 at some point way down the road. But at any rate, we have these 12 principles laid out in your booklet or in your manual. And so if you go to page, again, I'm reaching for my manual. If you go to page 9, you will see our 12 principles. Now, these are in alphabetical order. The numeric order is not in terms of priority, but these are in alphabetical order. And so let's just see how our 8 that populated and that were highlighted in our word cloud in terms of where the focus should be, or what we think are important areas, or the top 3 areas of managing a nonprofit. So transparency was number 1 in our word cloud. And so when we look at our list here, we do focus on looking at the way in which we manage our nonprofits across these 12 principles. And so we do have equity, diversity, and inclusion as a way of focusing on, or one of our main areas of managing a nonprofit. I'm trying to see, I know that we have transparency and accountability as it relates to, I know it's in board governance. I also know that it shows up, thank you, because I'm looking at my screen. It is legal compliance and transparency, number 8. Thank you, Van. And let's see, I was trying to see if there was any other place that's highlighted. And then community is our number 2 on our list in our word cloud. That would align with partnerships and collaboration. It would also align with civic engagement, which is principle number 1. And so there's the connection there. And then equity, of course, is in our principle number 3, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Then we have accounting. Of course, we have financial management. That's one of our topics for the Institute. Thank you, Mia. You're exactly right. That could go, that point about accountability and transparency could really go over or work through all of the principles, as does, at least we think, equity, diversity, and inclusion as well. So, and then of course, board governance, that's number 2. And then that is, as I mentioned before, financial management is 1. And then strategic was another focal point or area that we thought was important. And we have strategic communication and strategic planning as it relates to that. And then development, of course, principle number 5, which is fundraising. So we had, in terms of the word cloud, there were 8 that populated really big, and we were able to pull those out. Are there any on your list that's not on our list? And we can go back to the gallery view for that. You can use the chat if you'd like as well. Are there any that were on your list that we don't have on our list, or it didn't show up in the cloud? And you can unmute yourself, if you'd like. You don't have to just use the chat.
This is Dawn Blagrove with Emancipate NC. Trust is a big one for us. And it doesn't seem to, I may have missed it, and I looked through it a couple times, but I think that what we found is that when we have trust between everyone involved in the organization, it makes everything go smoother. Like, without trust, none of the rest of this stuff really matters, because mistrust breeds dissension. It can breed anarchy. So I think the trust is a core principle in management.
Thank you, Dawn. What I would add to that, so I am in Guilford County, and I've lived in the Jamestown, Greensboro, High Point community for a lot of years. And this year, the community of High Point is reading a book, a community read called Trust First, Dawn. And and it is written by Bruce Deal, D-E-E-L. We, as a matter of fact, we will be, our community will be on a virtual call with him tonight to talk about this read that's been going on for about really the whole summer. And so if you get a chance, his work is around homelessness. So if you get a chance, he's based out of Atlanta. That's as much as I'll say about that. But that his focus is all about trust, and that the work that he does with the homeless population in the Atlanta area has been founded on and continues to work around this notion of trust being an important part of how we help as it relates to his nonprofit in particular. But anyway, I don't work for Bruce Deal or anything like that. We just happen to be reading the book about trust. There are a couple more comments in the chat as well, Rebecca, that I want to get to, that folks are laying out in terms of what should be added to the list. I see leadership. I see credibility, effectiveness, communication. And if you'd like to unmute yourself and share, please do so.
I've been hesitant to speak because I'm looking to see if where some of the things that I'm thinking about are already somewhere in the principles that are defined. But what I'm looking for is around, I guess, kind of assessment of, of community need, like being authentically aware of what the community need is and your ability to engage their involvement in that need and that assessment of that, which kind of aligns with that trust element. And I think somebody else set up here, credibility. It's kind of in that same direction.
Thank you. And who was speaking?
I am Sister Joy with Bump the Triangle in Durham.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any others? I was looking just to your comment about that. I was just looking across the principles just to see if there was something that might be there, as you did. But and I do see that they have put the link to Trust First in the chat. So if some of you might be interested in that type of a read. Anybody else? Is there anything that we don't have in our list, or that?
Something that's come up in our world, especially in the last couple of years, is like systems leadership and understanding the system within that the nonprofits work with and the constituents of the nonprofits work with as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ren. Any questions about any of the 12 principles and our definitions of those 12 principles before we move into the next part of our framework?
I have a question just for grounding. I'm sorry. Are we, some of these, we're talking about specifically internal functions, or do these principles apply not just to internal to our organization, but also to external partnerships? Like when we're talking about partnerships and collaborations, things like that, are we talking about functioning inside, or is it, okay.
So we are talking about overall, we're talking about managing our nonprofits from the inside, right? And then this element of partnerships and collaboration is one of those areas in which many of our nonprofits are having to manage in terms of, carrying out your mission, trying to achieve that vision. And then in some cases, the whole idea of partnerships and collaboration is a requirement in order for us to engage in certain areas of work in our communities, but also in terms of funding, in terms of writing grants, and so on and so forth. So it is all of the principles in terms of how we have them framed are about managing from the inside. But we know that if we are effectively managing from the inside, we are significantly impacting the outside of our nonprofit organization. So that's the way in which this is framed. Any other questions about the principles? Very good question. Okay, so we're going to move into, I guess I could call it part 2 of the framework. And that is kind of looking a little bit closer at what we call management conditions, or the condition of management as it relates to your nonprofit. So you have a handout in your manual. It is on page, again, you see me reaching to my right because I've got my manual over to my right here. So that's page 10. So we're going to spend some time just really wanting to understand and elaborate on what we mean here. Once I go through this explanation, then we're going to go into breakouts, and we'll come back and talk about the question that you'll be answering for me. And then we'll take a little break after we do that. So in terms of management conditions, so one of the things that we wanted to be a part of this institute is we wanted to start off with, assessing where our nonprofits are before we get into the content and the training material. And then to look at where we are, and then as we learn about these different areas of management, that we would have you think about questions and think about situations and scenarios that you've experienced or are experiencing, whereby we can provide some guidance and in some cases support to you as you're learning about each one of these. So there are 3 management conditions that we highlight in our framework. The one is build, and then there is thrive, and then there's sustain. And if we could go to the slide for this. Perfect, thank you. So as we're thinking about the current management condition of our nonprofit organizations, what we're asking is, we're asking you to look at each principle and then to identify where your nonprofit is as it relates to its current condition. There is this overarching way in which we are defining each of these conditions. But when you begin to look at assessing each of the principles, each condition is customized around that particular principle. So when you look at fundraising, for example, and you look at, say, financial management, the descriptors or description of each of the conditions is going to be different. It's going to be based on that principle. But our overarching idea, right, around each of these is that build is when a nonprofit, this particular condition is when a nonprofit is meeting its legal requirements, meaning we're 501c3, we have that in place, You know, we're submitting our 990. You know, we're doing those fundamental kind of governance and nonprofit management work. We're doing that in a very kind of basic, I would say, way. So that's at Build. Thrive has really 3 parts to it. The first is that as a nonprofit, we are demonstrating a working knowledge of governance, oversight, which we know that is the focus of our board of directors and what they do, and then also managing a nonprofit. So we're demonstrating a working knowledge of that. And that's demonstrated in how we handle our day-to-day operations. So that's the second part. And then the third part of this is the human element, right? That all of this is happening with skilled and engaged boards of directors, staff, and also you can add here sometimes volunteers, because we know that oftentimes, especially those nonprofits that are here with us today, whereby you're a grassroots nonprofit, there's one of a kind, there's not another one like yours, so to speak. You're uniquely serving your community. And so oftentimes those are started with volunteers that evolve into bringing on staff and so on and so forth. So that's Thrive. And then what we mean by sustain as it relates to the current condition. Now, this has about 6 different pieces to it. The first part is the idea that your nonprofit, my nonprofit, is capable of sustainability. And that's evidenced by the recognition of your nonprofit as a community asset. That's number 1. Stable revenue streams. So there are resources, there's dollars, there's funds coming in, and it's pretty stable and consistent. Operating reserves. Wow, that's a major accomplishment, right? When our nonprofits can have a reserve. And then our programs are robust. And this means also that our programs have a track record of having impact, achieving outcomes, and making a difference in our community. Also, there's strong governance. So our board of directors is active, they're engaged, they know what our nonprofit is all about, what its mission is, and they are helping to perform and carry out the work as needed in their role as board members. And then the last piece of this is, and there's respect from our peers in the community and also our constituents. They recognize us as being a resource in our community, and they hold us in high regard. So Build, Thrive, Sustain, current condition in terms of management. And we use these frames to help us to kind of assess where a nonprofit is so that we know what types of things we need to do to engage in capacity building. The first one was capable of sustainability, and that's evidenced by recognition as a community asset. Number 1, did you say 1 or 6? Let me go back to the chat. It popped up and then it went away. Yeah, the first one. It is recognized as a community asset. Absolutely. So a question in the chat is, can an organization teeter between 2 conditions? Yes, it can. Again, keep in mind, you know, the way in which we utilize our this level or this way of assessing is to give us a temperature gauge or just kind of give us a general sense of where we are. When we go into the next step of this today, we will actually be honing in on making a selection of 2. So, and I'll talk more about that when we get there, but yes, you can teeter between the 2. Can you be both? My preference is not. My preference is that you can land on one for the purpose of giving an assessment. However, it's very appropriate to talk about, you know, where your organization or where your nonprofit, where it exemplifies, say, thrive in terms of the question here, and then where it might exemplify elements of sustain or build. Okay. Any other just general questions? I can see I see questions in the chat here. There's a comment. I would add something to the thrive and sustain, having to do with organizational culture and employee engagement. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you for that. And please keep it coming, right, in terms of those thoughts and ideas that you have about the tools that we use, because we want to enhance what we do as we move forward with implementing the Institute long-term. So thank you for that. Any other, I don't see any other questions in the chat before we go into breakouts. Can we go back to gallery? And I don't know if anyone has a comment or thought before we do our breakout work, but you can unmute yourself if you like, and you can share that. Otherwise, we're gonna take off and go into the breakouts here in just a second. When we go in our breakout sessions, our breakout, what did I say? Sessions, breakout rooms. When we go into our breakout rooms, we want you to answer this question. And if we could put the question in the chat. The question is, what is the difference? What is the difference of each of these frames? So what do you consider to be the difference of each frame? Build, thrive, sustain, in terms of how you how your group kind of views that. So that's what we want you to ponder and talk about in your breakout. And true to form, if you could identify someone who will share that, share what it is that your group has talked through when we return. And I believe, Rebecca, we're doing 10 minutes in the breakout. And I'm going to pass it over to either you or Leslie to give instructions about the breakout rooms.
Leslie, you want me to do the breakouts? Okay, I can tell by the look on your face. All right, so we're gonna pop you into breakout rooms. If you should find yourself in a breakout room with only with you yourself and alone in breakout room, feel free to come back to the main room and we'll pop you into one that has more people. So we're gonna go ahead and assign these. We'll come back in about 10 minutes. And then after that, we'll have a quick break. Is that correct, Dr. Palmer?
That's correct.
Okay. And just a reminder, you're to talk through the differences of each of these frames with your group, build, thrive, and sustain. All right. We'll see you back here in 10.
Well, welcome back. I see we're all making our way back to the main room here. Rebecca, how many breakout rooms did we have?
I believe we had 8.
8 breakouts. Okay.
We may have had more. Let me check real quick.
Okay.
We had, yep, 8.
Okay, great. All right, so we'd like to hear back from each group. And since we have 8, if we could just, okay, Joy, gotcha. So if we could just kind of keep in mind, you know, that there are 8 groups when you're giving your feedback. So if you could kind of manage, you know, how you comment in terms of time. There's no particular order that we have to go in. And so the question that we were answering is, what is the difference in the 3 frames? And so who wants to jumpstart the feedback?
I'll jump start. This is Wayne. I think I was in group 4. I can't remember, but we had a great session. And I think that the key point on our session was we had some, I felt like we had a lot of, my sanctuary house had a lot of tenure at 20 years, but we had people that had 50 years and 40 years in there. So our main group was in the sustain area. And we all took a look at it and said, well, we can be in the sustain area, but we still have areas to grow. We just took a look at what we wanted to do to grow. Like one person's idea was to grow because they want to understand how to use their operating reserves better. I, in a situation, want to learn, even though we're in the sustain, we still need to grow our board better, but we meet everything else that's there. But our board needs to still grow. I've got questions about that. What was interesting, we did have one newer member who was been around for 5 years, and they were in the Thrive area. And they were talking about a lot of the different differences between the Thrive area and the Sustain area. It was very interesting to see the differences between the two and what needs to be done to get from Thrive to Sustain. Now, the other comment was, and I agree with this comment because I've been there too, is how many times do we go from Sustain back to Thrive, back to Build, back to, I've been there. And I've been in the board for 6 years, and how many times we have bounced back and forth. And we just happen to be in the sustain right now, but we do bounce back and forth.
Thank you, Wayne. And I'll just comment on that last part. Yes, or nonprofit organizations, definitely they're experiencing a life cycle in terms of when they were established and how many years they've been in operation. But when you're looking at it from a management perspective and from a responding to change perspective, it is very common that a nonprofit might move in and out of those particular frames as it relates to what's going on at that particular time. Let's just say, for example, you've had an executive director or a president and CEO for 25, 30 years, same one, they decide to resign, leave, retire, what have you. Okay, then you're gonna go through a change, and that might impact where you are as far as management condition. I'll stop there and we'll go to the next one. Thank you, Wayne.
I can represent group 7. We talked about how when you first think of Build, you assume that it's a new organization that's just starting. But like Dr. Palmer and Wayne said, it can also be an organization that's just doing the bare minimum and coasting. The status quo, or an organization that simply, that's all the capacity they have, is to just do the bare minimum to function. We also talked about how an organization really at any point can go back and forth on the spectrum, and they can jump over, if they've been around a long time, they can jump over Thrive and go from Sustain to Build. And how it depends on who's driving and what the staff is, the culture and the morale of the staff. When talking about Sustain, one of the things we talked about is sustainability is really at that space where you have maximum impact externally on systems and influence in communities and beyond just your community, and out where Thrive is, you're solidifying that internal and external impact. Did I miss
Thank you.
anything, ladies?
Thank you, Mia, and thank you for representing breakout room number 7. I'm going to continue on to the next one.
Hello, my name is Bree. I believe I'm representing breakout session 3, breakout room 3. Very similar to what everyone else has shared. My mind went to one of the things I shared in our breakout room was that when we were talking about the different, I kind of looked at it as stages for a second, thinking about how like the build is the foundation of the house. Thrive is, if you can think about the structure, that's when they're putting up the wooden panels. And then the sustain, that's when you're finishing up the final touches, everything is looking well. But then someone shared that, again, we can go through these different stages at any life cycle of a nonprofit. And so that was a great point to hear. And it sounds like we all kind of come to that conclusion. And talking about looking at these things with a bird's eye view and kind of being able to assess kind of where your damage is coming from and kind of overcoming that, if you will. So thank you.
Bree, is that Caring Services High Point?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We're going to go on to the next one. Thank you for representing group 3 or breakout room 3.
Hey, my name's Chance. I'm with group 5 from the breakout. I'm with St. Savior Center in Wake County. The group that we were with, I think, didn't really openly discuss, I think, the fluidity of going from phase to phase. But I think the 3 items that we identified in making a transition one way or another kind of speaks to that fluidity. We really kind of centrally discussed, I think, your transitions either up or down primarily is impacted by the mission that you have and how well defined that it is. I think the people who are advocates for that mission, from the board down to volunteers, particularly we discussed those people in the right places being advocates and change agents to be able to adapt as times change. So not only being the catalyst for growing your organization, but also not limiting the organization in certain ways. And then lastly would be the culture in which you work in that helps reinforce amongst your staff and volunteers, your mission and your outward community outreach and engagement. So I think those were kind of the 3 things that we discussed, kind of swinging you either up or kind of down those 3 things.
Thank you, Chance. Thank you for representing breakout room 5. Thank you. And if you hear something that resonates and you want to make a comment, please do so. Just unmute yourself and just jump right in. Don't hesitate to do that. Are there any comments about the feedback that you've heard so far before we finish with the last ones? Okay. We're at the next breakout.
I'll go. Hello?
Yes.
I'm representing group 2, I believe we were. So we said a lot of similar things, used a lot of similar metaphors as the other groups. So the main thing I'll just mention is the one I think that stands out is that, as we discussed, the sustain stage, thinking of that as your organization has structure and enough structure that it could survive leadership changes. Not that those leadership changes couldn't knock you back a step, but basically if someone were to leave the organization, your executive director or a prominent board member, that the organization has enough capacity and enough systems in place that it can continue on without falling apart. Whereas compared to like a build stage, if that particularly if that build is just based on capacity, if an ED, if one existed, or a prominent volunteer board member left, there may be a collapse of that foundation because it just isn't strong enough to sustain. So I think that's a big difference between each of those stages, is kind of, can you exist if there's a big shakeup?
And Jessica, what was your breakout room number, did you say?
Yeah, I think we were number 2.
Oh, okay, that's what all right, okay. And thank you for representing number 2. There's a couple of comments in the chat, and one was about succession planning at all levels. Many nonprofits currently are experiencing some challenges as it relates to the CEO, president, executive director transitioning out of that role. And so you're exactly right. I saw the comment about succession planning at all levels is definitely important, not just with the person who is in the executive director role, but also other staff and board members, you know, in terms of succession planning there, because that does have a lot to do with the current state of management, if I could kind of couch it that way. We've got two more to, is it two more or three more to go? So next.
We were group 1.
Oh, good.
And we talked about how it's sort of like a continuum moving from operational to strategic. And one of the things, adding on to what Jessica just said, is it's once you're in that sustained place, you have the capacity to take on new challenges or to pivot and be responsive to challenging things.
Thank you, Ren, for representing Breakout Room 1. I think we got two more.
I'll go quickly. We're Breakout Room 8. We spent a lot of time just kind of standing on each other and talking about the work that we were doing. But so very, very little time actually
The social group.
Actually responding to the question. Exactly. But I think one of the things that we've heard many of the things that have already been discussed, the fluidity and the real fluidity between each one of these stages, and how other things can throw you out from one stage to the next. We talked a little bit also about, for me anyways, what makes the difference between thriving and sustainability for us is funding. And as a Black-led organization, that is something that is very, very real and very unique. And right now we're in a situation where we talked about funders being trying to spend some time creating equity for the lack of equity that existed in distribution of funding to Black-led organizations. And I am sustainable right now, but I do not know if that paradigm is going to stay, if that is a permanent paradigm shift, or if that is something that is fleeting. And our sustainability will absolutely depend upon whether or not funders actually recognize and continue to recognize and adjust for the inequitable distribution of funds historically. And I also wanted to touch really quickly on the face of your organization being a driver and sustainer. I think there are some organizations that I think it's unfair to say that you cannot be a sustainer organization if your organization cannot exist without your leader. I think about specifically, the first thing that comes to mind is Brian Stevenson and his organization. I think that his organization is without question sustainable, but I also think that it is foolhardy to think that without Brian being the face of his org, that his org would not garner the same level of attention that it does. Who your face is matters. And I think that is true no matter what level you're at. And I think that it is, I think it's somewhat naive or centered in some kind of privilege to think that it's not. A dynamic leader matters a lot.
Thank you. And then the next one. And there's a resource in the chat as well. I think I just kind of saw that pop up. Is there one more? Is there one more group? Okay.
Yes, yeah, I'm not sure that we actually, I don't think we assigned anybody to speak, so.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Van, for stepping up.
Yeah, I think, we've touched on a lot of these things, but I think we also felt that a lot of, was based on the funding sources and having sustainable funding and the reputation that you have and the respect of your community and your peers see you as essential. I think those were the two big things that we kind of came out with as far as being the difference, with that reputation really being the big thing to be a sustaining organization. And so, I mean, I believe that, the succession planning was mentioned in the chat, and I believe that's a big part of make sure that organization can sustain. Having just come from an organization where we had a leadership change, a founder after 28 years, and seeing the shakeup that's going on there right now, I think it's more important than ever to make sure that we have to be able to sustain, to have that succession planning in place moving forward.
Okay. So I think that is all of our groups. So the purpose of this segment or of our experience this morning was to really to help us to, one, kind of introduce the way in which we're framing the current state of a nonprofit as it relates to management, to spend some time with that information and to kind of digest it and work with it just a little bit. Keeping in mind that what we just covered are the overarching areas of a nonprofit's management condition. And it is a overarching way in which we have framed and defined what Build, Thrive, and Sustain is. When we look at the specific principles, however, Build, Thrive, and Sustain are customized in terms of how we describe each principle utilizing the frames. So just kind of know we're about to move into that piece of our work of looking at specifically the principles, determining where our organizations are as it relates to the current management condition, and then moving a little bit deeper with that and highlighting the 6 principles that are a part of the Institute. So we're going to take a break now. Rebecca will tell us how long our break will be. And then we will come back and we will actually work on assessing our capacity across the 12 principles, looking and using the different frames.
Great. Yes, thank you all. Thanks for jumping in and putting yourself out there. We'll go ahead and take a 10-minute break. We'll return back here at 11:10 and we'll pause recording in the meantime.
One, understanding the management conditions and how to use those frames to help us to assess our current capacity as it relates to the current state of management, of which we call management condition. So in doing so, in your booklet, you will need pages 11 through 14. And you will also need the worksheet on page 15. And so you will be using both of those pieces of information. Pages 11 through 14 is each of the principles with a customized Build, Thrive, and Sustain frame, with the customized Build, Thrive, and Sustain frames. And what we're asking you to do is to study each of the principles and the accompanying frames, and to note on the worksheet which of those frames best describes where your nonprofit is in terms of its current condition today. So again, you're going to be using pages 11 through 14. And you're going to be using the worksheet on page 15 to record where your nonprofit is currently as it relates to the current management condition. And so we're going to give you time to do that. You're gonna make the assessment as it relates to each of the 12 principles. And then we're going to do a deeper dive with 6 of these 12 that align with the topics for the Institute. So I'm gonna go silent here and let you work on that.
I'll pop in real quick. We have a habit of playing some focus music, some chill hop. Kind of helps you to have some noise. If you don't prefer to listen to it, please just take down your volume. Leslie's got it queued up and we'll begin that here. How many minutes are we taking, Dr. Palmer?
Let's do, I don't know, seven to 10 minutes to go through. Yeah. So at
Great.
about 8 or 9 minutes, you'll hear me talking again.
Okay, thank you.
And feel free to ask questions if you need to. You can use the chat or you can.
Dr. Palmer, would you like to reiterate what the assignment is for folks that are
Sure.
joining us? Yep.
Absolutely. The assignment is you're going to be using pages 11 through 14, and you're going to use page 15, which is your worksheet. For each of the principles, you're going to indicate the current condition of your nonprofit. So each of the 12 principles are listed. Each frame is customized, or set of frames is customized to describe, build, thrive, and sustain for each principle.
Thank you.
Welcome. take about 1 more minute and then we'll come back. Okay, so on your worksheet page, what we would like for you to do is to indicate, just at the bottom, how many builds do you have? How many thrives do you have in terms of your current condition? And how many sustains do you have in terms of where you are? And I'm going to have you communicate in the chat. And I want to start with build. Give me an idea of, just put in the chat. You don't have to put which ones. Give me an idea, or give me the number of builds that you had checked off. I'm just curious. Okay, I can see, yeah. Okay. Great, great, okay. Great. Okay. Thank you, thanks. And then how many thrives do we have in terms of current condition being thrive? Mm-hmm. Okay. And then how many sustain? Okay. This just kind of gives me just at a glance, kind of where we are. Okay. Okay. So again, what we're wanting to do, or at least what we wanted to do up to this point, is to immerse ourselves into using the frames and what they mean, and how the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits is utilizing Build, Thrive, and Sustain to help us to benchmark or temperature gauge kind of where we are as it relates to these fundamental functions of management for nonprofit organizations. So in this work that we've done so far, we looked across all 12. I wanted you to become more familiar with how each of the frames are customized related to each principle. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go a little deeper with the assessment, with assessing capacity. And we're going to focus on the 6 principles that align with with the Nonprofit Management Institute and what we will be covering going forward. So you have in your, let me get over to this in my manual here. If you go over to page 16 through, I thought I had that already paper clipped. 16 through 29, are the pages that we're focusing on. And if we could show the slide for capacity assessment, where it has the 12 principles, and then it's got the 3 management conditions. Just want to highlight that. Or actually, we can go ahead to capacity assessment. So you can go ahead to that slide. You can keep going. One more right here. Okay. So while we have 12 principles, we're going to assess the capacity of our nonprofits based on 6 of the principles: board governance, financial management, fundraising, human resources, program design, management and evaluation, and strategic planning. So let me give you the page numbers for those. So for board governance is page 17 and 18. For financial management, it's page 20 and 21, sorry, 20 and 21. For fundraising is page 22. For human resources is page 23. For program design, management, and evaluation, it is page, let me make sure I get these, 27. And then for strategic planning is page 29. Do I need to repeat those page numbers? I can do that. Or can someone from the group do it? I don't have to be the one to do it. Can someone from the group go through the page numbers based on what, if you wrote them down? Board governance is 17 and 18, page 17 and 18.
They're putting them in the chat too.
Oh, okay, great. And again, I am okay if someone wants to shout those out as opposed to folks having to read that in the chat. I just wanted to guide you a little bit as to where they are. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to take a deeper dive into assessing capacity. And we're going to assess capacity based on these 6 principles. And as I mentioned before, these are the topics that we're going to highlight and that we're going to focus on in our institute. What we're going to do for each of these principles, you will use an electronic worksheet for this. And I'm going to, once I finish giving these instructions, I'm going to let Rebecca kind of share with you how we're going to do that so that you can insert this information electronically. So what we're going to do is have you indicate by marking those areas that you want to enhance your capacity. So in other words, you're going to mark those and indicate those in the electronic survey is what we're calling it. It is it's a SurveyMonkey platform that we're using for that. And I see the page numbers for each of the principles is highlighted on the screen now. Thank you. I don't know if that was Leslie or Rebecca, but thank you for doing that. So again, for each of these 6 principles, we're gonna go a little deeper with the capacity assessment, and we're gonna have you to indicate the practices that your nonprofit is in need of working on or that you would like to enhance.
I'll go ahead and share the SurveyMonkey link in the chat.
Okay.
The first page is just basic demographics that we asked you to complete so that we can send you your individual results by email. So please feel free to go through that way. The survey does allow you to not select any within any given management condition or principle. So if there's nothing that you're planning to work on in those, you can feel free to skip and move on to the next section.
And if we can go to the next slide.
Mhm.
So if we were looking at, we are using as an example, we're using fundraising. So for example, you would, so notice that those are all 6 of the principles, but in this part of our assessment work, we're focusing on the practices. And each of the principles have 3 sets of practices. Those practices are under Build, Thrive, and Sustain, which is kind of where we started with all of this and understanding the Build, Thrive, and Sustain frames. So you're going to indicate, you're going to choose the practices that you want to work on or that you want to enhance as it relates to 6 of the principles. And so we highlighted fundraising here. And you can see the different practices that go with each one, and you would just indicate or select the practices that you want to work on as it relates to your nonprofit. This is all done electronically, so we will be able to produce individual results for each of your organizations, and also we will have, we'll be able to aggregate that information and have some collective results as well. So, which will inform us as we move forward in learning and training on the other, on all 6 principles.
As we're doing this, do you all, like, just from your past trainings that you've had, do you guys have like a minimum or maximum number as we're looking through the practices that that create the best outcome of growth? So like if I'm looking at board governance, like we're on the build for every one of these. So it's like there's several things. So I don't want to put like 10 things on there and then that's not realistic to have achieved all those. So like, that's what I'm asking. Is there like a minimum that you all seen that created the best results at the end, or just, it doesn't matter, just select as many as we want. And then that's going to be our evaluation at the end, just to kind of give us an overall glance. Okay.
It's the latter. It's the
Okay.
latter.
Thank
You're
you.
indicating where you want to do work. And we highly encourage all of us not to view this as a grade. This is to give us a sense of our starting point. So it's not about, you know, kind of assessing, well, are we doing well or are we doing fair? Or it is really, let's kind of gauge, benchmark where we are, and then we build out how we want to, what we want to work on as it relates to building capacity.
Dr. Palmer, could you explain again? Maybe I missed it. Like you were saying, you want to collect, you know, results. What for this session, over the course of session? Could you explain that more?
So once we have all of your feedback as it relates to what you want to work on, then we'll have all of that. We'll have that collected, and we'll be, it'll be the results of everybody inputting their information.
Just for your information, or does it have a bearing on like future sessions or?
Yeah, so okay, so sorry. Let me go further back. I'm sorry, let me go further back in the explanation. So each organization will provide for us the different practices that you want to work on. That's kind of the beginning of this. And then once you indicate what you want to work on, then as we're moving through the training on each principle, we'll have this information to inform us of what it is that we might need to put emphasis on, what it is that we might need to bring additional resources about. So it informs me as your facilitator on how to build out, how to add to, how to focus those sessions to come. But it also will give us collectively, I call them the kind of the results of getting your feedback about what areas of capacity you want to work on. Does that help?
It does. Thank you.
Sure.
And Dr. Palmer, when we're thinking about each of the principles, do the practices that we're selecting have to line up with where we might have assessed ourselves? So I was the one that said, for example, one principle I might straddle between build and thrive. So if I'm 2 practices away from completing or maxing out in the thrive category, but I'm majority in build, can I be looking to work on those areas in thrive, or should I focus on where we are in that category where we are now?
You are checking off all the areas that you want to work on.
Okay.
And in doing that, can we have check boxes across the 3 conditions, or do we just need to stick with like one condition?
You could have check boxes across all 3.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And think about it in the sense of over the next year, over the next 2 years, not in terms of 10 years from now, but more short term. So what is it that you want to enhance as it relates to capacity in like a year or 2, as opposed to 10 years down the road? And again, we are looking at this information to inform us about our content as we plan for each of the sessions. It helps to inform me of what is really kind of top of the list for the collective group as it relates to what to focus on. Does that make sense? And if we could go to,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, if we could go to gallery view, yeah. And I don't want to move too quickly without making sure that we all understand what our task is. Are there any more questions about kind of what we're doing or how we're doing, how we're assessing capacity or why we're assessing capacity? Any other, please don't hesitate to ask. How is everyone coming along with the link, with the SurveyMonkey link? Give us an idea with that. Now, if some of you are like me, my tech savvy is limited. So, sometimes when I'm trying to navigate and do some of what we're asking you to do, it can be a little bit cumbersome. So if, please don't hesitate to let us know, because we want us all to be on the same page. There's a question, is there a way to get a copy of our completed survey? Rebecca, you want to respond to how we do that?
Yes, so we'll be sending you your individual results within the next few days. So you'll get an email from me that'll have a link to a PDF that will populate all your responses. And then I'll be compiling the top responses within each practice and sharing that with Dr. Palmer, and we'll be working through that in the next session. And like she said, it'll help inform her on what she focuses on going forward within each of those principles that we're covering.
So it is 11:37. And so our stop time is 12:30. Give me a head nod if we're in agreement with that. Okay, all right. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna go silent until 12 o'clock. And I'm gonna give you time to, I'll check in to see where we are with you assessing capacity of the 6 principles that are going to be our areas of focus for the Nonprofit Management Institute. Again, I'm going to go silent, and if you have any questions, I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. You can ask questions, you can put them in the chat, you can unmute yourself. Feel free to do that. This is an open space for that. So I'll see you on the other side of completing your assessment.
Thanks. We'll go ahead and pause recording for this gap. And